Today I will tell you a story about the promise of safety that turned into something far different. My daughter and her husband assured me that in their house I would never have to worry again. But after they left for vacation, the walls of that house began to whisper secrets I was never meant to hear. They told me, "You are safe here," and left behind a bottle of wine as a gesture of comfort. Yet once the door shut, I realized safety can sometimes be the most fragile illusion. It was not safety at all. It was something else, waiting quietly behind the polished surface. Remember to like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts below so you can continue to follow our grandma life stories, each one carrying its own lessons about family, trust, and the hidden cost of betrayal. My name is Evelyn Ross. I was 67 years old when this chapter of my life began. I had spent most of my life as a community nurse in Boston, walking through quiet neighborhoods, visiting homes, offering small acts of care. My husband, Michael, had been my partner in everything. He passed away after a sudden illness, leaving me in the house we had shared for decades. That house was full of creaks and faded curtains, and memories that could comfort me one moment and break me the next. I lived alone there for nearly 3 years. The stairs grew harder to climb, and the nights grew longer. Some evenings, I would sit in my kitchen with a cup of tea, hearing the silence echo around me. Loneliness has its own sound, steady and heavy, like rain tapping on windows without pause. Clara, my only daughter, visited often in those days. She was always dressed impeccably, her hair pinned neatly, her words efficient and sharp. "Mom, this house is too much for you. Come stay with us. Our home is modern, secure. You will be safe." She repeated that word again and again, safe. Nathan, her husband, would nod beside her. He had a way of watching me quietly, his phone often in hand, his mind elsewhere. "It makes sense," he added once. "You will not be alone, and we will know you are cared for." Their invitation sounded kind, but beneath Clara's polished smile, I sensed something else. Perhaps it was her need for control or her obsession with appearances. She wanted everything in her life to look perfect, including how she cared for her aging mother. Nathan's voice carried ambition, though he spoke softly. He had been chasing projects in technology for years, some successful, most not. I did not understand yet how his world of machines would entangle me. I resisted at first. Pride held me back. I wanted to keep my independence, to stay in the home Michael and I had built together. But as winter pressed in and climbing the stairs became painful, I gave in. I told myself I was lucky to have a daughter who wanted me close. I told myself their promise of safety was genuine. The move to Newton happened quickly. Clara's house was large, gleaming, with a white facade and carefully trimmed hedges. The driveway curved like a clean line on paper, and the glass door opened into a space that felt more like a gallery than a home. Every corner was curated. The kitchen counters gleamed like mirrors. The furniture looked untouched, chosen for style rather than comfort. Even the air seemed controlled, filtered, without scent. Clara led me from room to room, her heels clicking on the hardwood. "This is your bedroom, Mom, on the first floor, so you do not have to climb stairs. Everything is modern. Everything is easy. You are safe here." She repeated those words again, as if saying them enough would make them true. Nathan joined us, pointing out panels on the walls. Voice command for the lights, temperature control by phone, security cameras cover the property. It is a smart system. You will not have to worry about anything. He sounded proud, almost triumphant. I thanked them, forcing a smile, though unease pressed against my chest. My old house had sagging shelves, a chipped teapot, photographs in wooden frames. This house had steel, glass, and silence. That first evening, we sat together for dinner. Clara spoke about her career, her projects, her endless plans. Nathan stayed quiet, absorbed in his phone, occasionally nodding. I asked about Liam, my grandson. Clara answered quickly, shifting back to her own subjects. I felt invisible, like a guest passing through rather than a mother or grandmother. Later that night, as I unpacked my few belongings, Clara appeared in my doorway. Mom, just remember to keep things tidy. This house must stay the way it is. No clutter, no old habits. Please. Her smile was polite, but her eyes were sharp. I nodded again, though my heart sank a little. The next morning, they told me they were leaving for a week in Maui. Clara hugged me stiffly. Nathan patted my shoulder. Liam was already at camp. Mom, enjoy the house. Rest. Everything you need is here. On the counter, they left a bottle of red wine with a note written in Clara's perfect handwriting. For your quiet evenings, thank you for staying. I stood in the doorway as their car pulled away. The street outside was calm, neighbors' lawns trimmed neatly, but inside the house, silence swelled around me. The refrigerator hummed softly, the air vents whispered, even the lights seemed to blink with measured rhythm. I tried to shake the unease. I told myself this was comfort, this was protection. I made tea and settled in the armchair by the window. Outside, children's laughter drifted faintly from down the street. Inside, I heard clicks and hums I could not place. The house felt alive, as though it breathed around me. That night, when I turned off the lamp and lay back in bed, I saw it, a small red light in the corner of the ceiling, pulsing faintly. At first, I thought it was part of a smoke alarm, but the light blinked rhythmically, steady and deliberate, like an eye that never closed. I lay still, the blanket pulled to my chin. The promise of safety replayed in my mind. Clara's words, Nathan's quiet assurance, the note on the counter. Yet, as I stared at that blinking red dot, I wondered what safety truly meant. I whispered into the darkness, "You are safe here." That is what they said. But as the silence of the house pressed in, and the small red light continued its steady beat, I felt a question growing heavier inside me. Safe from what and for whom? The blinking red light in the corner of my ceiling would not leave my mind. It pulsed steadily as though it was breathing above me. I turned my head into the pillow, but the glow bled into the dark, reminding me of a truth I had not yet admitted. I was being watched. As my eyes closed, a memory rose, clear and sharp, dragging me back to the weeks before I moved in. Clara had walked into my old kitchen, her face twisted into that familiar tight smile. She glanced around at my cluttered shelves, the teapot with its chipped spout, the uneven stacks of magazines on the table. Her laugh came quickly, brittle and cutting. "Mom, you really cannot keep living like this. You always leave things out. You always let the house look messy. You know it does not look good." Her voice sliced through me. I had spent decades keeping that home running, raising her in those same rooms, cooking dinners at that stove, folding laundry on that couch. And now she looked at it as though it was an embarrassment. She tapped the counter with her manicured nail, her eyes narrowing. "When you come to our house, it has to stay perfect. No clutter, no old habits. You cannot make it look like this." I answered softly, trying to defend myself. "Clara, this is just living. A home has signs of life. That is what makes it warm." Her smile sharpened, tilting almost into a smirk. "Warm is just another word for sloppy. You will see, Mom. Our house is designed to be flawless. We like it that way." Nathan had been there too, leaning against the doorway with his phone in hand. He lifted his head only when Clara finished speaking. His tone was colder, steady, rehearsed. "Our system takes care of everything. Lighting, temperature, movement. It learns the rhythms of the house. It notices when something changes. That is the beauty of it." I frowned, confused. "Notices? What do you mean?" Nathan looked at me with a kind of pride I could not understand. "The system tracks. It recognizes habits. If you put something out of place, it will know. It is not just security, it is intelligence." Clara's laugh followed immediately, light but laced with steel. "So, Mom, you will not need to worry. The house will remind you when you do something wrong." The words landed like a slap. I laughed weakly, trying to hide the sting, but inside, something tightened. I should have recognized it then. This was not an invitation. It was a warning. Back in the present, I lay awake under the blinking red dot, the cruel smile of my daughter still echoing in my memory. She had disguised contempt as concern. Nathan had disguised surveillance as innovation. I had let myself believe in their promise of safety, but I was not blind. Their words had been dripping with conditions. I pushed the blanket aside and sat up, my breath sharp in the stillness. The house hummed with its endless mechanical rhythm. The refrigerator clicked. The air vents sighed. Somewhere in the hallway, a light flickered on and off, triggered not by my movement but by something else unseen. I listened, alert, every muscle stiff. The flashback replayed again, this time with even more clarity. Clara standing over me, wagging her finger at the photo frames I had once hung crooked on my old walls. "Do not bring those with you, Mom. They will ruin the design. Everything in our home is intentional. Everything has a place. We do not want sentimental clutter." I had smiled weakly then, agreeing to leave most of Michael's photos behind, though every piece of me screamed to hold on. She had called them clutter. He had been my life. Nathan had stepped in, tapping the edge of the table with that same smug assurance. "You will not miss them. We will give you better things. And besides, the system records, you will always have reminders." The system records. I had nodded, not understanding what he really meant. Now, in the glow of that red light above me, the truth struck with merciless clarity. They did not mean reminders for me. They meant records for them. I rose and walked to the living room. The silence weighed heavier than I had ever known. The white walls reflected nothing of me. The furniture was untouched, stiff, arranged like an exhibit. I looked around and felt the cruel smile of Clara stretch across every surface, the cold pride of Nathan embedded in every panel. This was not a home. This was a stage, and I was not a mother here. I was a subject. The words Nathan had spoken came back to me with precision. If you put something out of place, it will know. His pride, his quiet arrogance, now rang like a confession. Clara's smirk, her mocking tone, pressed harder into my chest. The house will remind you when you do something wrong. They had not built a place for me to belong. They had built a cage where I could be monitored, measured, corrected. Their kindness was not kindness. It was control. I pressed my palms to the counter, staring at the note Clara had left with the wine bottle. "For your quiet evenings." My lips trembled into a bitter smile. They did not want me to have peace. They wanted me contained. They wanted my silence, not my presence. I whispered into the empty kitchen, my voice shaking but firm. "You promised safety, but safety should not feel like chains." The house offered no answer, only the steady hum of machines. I returned to my room and lay down again, staring at that blinking red light. I could feel the cruel smile of my daughter, the cold pride of my son-in-law, stitched into that tiny pulsing glow. My heart pounded, but my mind was sharper than ever. I knew what this meant. I was not here as family. I was here as data. And if I was data, I would need to find proof. The cruel smile had been planted long before I stepped inside this house, and now as the walls seemed to tighten around me, I felt the weight of every word they had spoken. They believed they had built a perfect system, but they had underestimated me. Their house might watch me, but I had eyes too. When the sound of their car faded and the silence sealed itself inside the walls, I stood in the center of Clara's immaculate home and felt the weight of its perfection pressing down on me. The counters gleamed under the recessed lights, polished so brightly they reflected my face in pale fragments. The floorboards shone like glass, untouched, flawless. Even my footsteps echoed too loudly, as if I were trespassing in a sterile laboratory, instead of being welcomed into a family's living space. The living room stretched before me, every piece of furniture aligned with military precision. The cushions on the sofa stood sharp, not a crease in sight. The curtains fell in perfect folds, measured to the inch. On the wall, a large screen displayed the home's control system. Lights toggled automatically from day mode to evening. The cameras, displayed in small panels across the screen, showed the backyard, the front steps, the garage, and the empty hallways inside. Watching them cycle made me feel like I had already disappeared, reduced to another feed in their grid of surveillance. I tried to steady my breath. "You are safe here," I reminded myself. Safe, because that was what Clara had promised. Safe, because Nathan had said the system noticed everything, but safety should not feel like exposure. Every time I shifted in my chair, I heard the air vents respond with a subtle sigh. When I walked into the kitchen, the overhead light snapped on before my hand touched the switch. When I moved toward the hallway, the floor lights glowed along my path as though anticipating each step. I whispered under my breath, "This house knows me better than my own daughter." The refrigerator hummed at a steady pitch, its temperature screen glowing in pale blue. I opened it to find food stacked in labeled containers. Chicken neatly sliced, vegetables chopped, fruit sealed in plastic boxes. Each item had a printed date, a system too organized to be lived in. I touched one of the containers and pulled back quickly, as if I had intruded into a stranger's plan. I carried a mug of tea into the dining room and paused. The table was set, though no one was here. Plates, glasses, silverware, laid out with precision, as if waiting for a magazine photograph instead of a meal. I placed my mug at one end and watched the steam rise, a faint sign of life in a room that otherwise seemed staged for display. The silence unsettled me. My old house had its imperfections, creaking floors, drafty windows, cluttered shelves, but it carried warmth. Here, every sound was mechanical. Every shift in light, every click of the thermostat reminded me I was a guest in a structure that operated on its own terms. I moved into the hallway. My footsteps echoed. The walls painted a sterile white that swallowed any sense of comfort. A framed piece of abstract art hung beside the thermostat, colors clashing without meaning. Clara had chosen it, I knew, for its style, not for what it said. That was her way. Appearance before substance. As I walked, a sensor caught me, and a narrow strip of light illuminated the floor. I froze, feeling suddenly like a specimen moving through a test chamber. The word Nathan had used returned to me. The system notices. The system was noticing me now. Every movement, every hesitation. I stepped back into the kitchen and forced myself to sit down. I wrapped my hands around the chipped mug I had carried from my old house, the only object of mine that had made it into this sterile place. I stared at it, rough edges and faded paint, and felt tears prick my eyes. This mug belonged to me. This house did not. The control screen on the wall flickered. One camera feed shifted, then another. My face appeared briefly in the corner before the image cycled away. I rose quickly, my chest tight, and walked toward the panel. I touched the screen, but it asked for a password. Of course it did. This was not my house. I was not trusted with access. I whispered to myself, "So I am safe, but I am locked out. I am here, but invisible." I wandered into the guest bathroom. The mirror lit up automatically, flooding the room with sterile brightness. I looked into my own eyes and saw someone I barely recognized. Tired, yes, older, certainly. But there was also a flicker of defiance, a spark of awareness. The walls might hum with control, but I still had my mind, and I would not surrender it easily. In the guest bedroom, the sheets were crisp and the pillows perfectly aligned. I sat on the edge of the bed and pressed my palms against the coverlet. It smelled faintly of detergent, nothing human. I lay back, staring at the ceiling. That was when I noticed it again, a tiny red glow pulsing faintly in the corner. My heart clenched. It was too deliberate, too alive to be nothing. I forced myself to look away, but the image lingered. The dot blinked like a heartbeat. Every few seconds, a reminder that I was not alone. I turned onto my side, gripping the pillow. My breathing grew shallow. Memories of Clara's voice returned, sharp and cold. This house must stay perfect. Nathan's pride echoed too. The system learns. The system knows. I closed my eyes, but the silence of the house was no comfort. It pressed against me, heavy, suffocating, until even the sound of my breath felt loud. I pulled the blanket to my chin, but the weight inside me only grew. Lying there, I thought of Michael, of the nights we had shared in our small house. The creak of the stairs had been a song, the drip of the faucet a companion. Here, everything was silent except for machines. Silence was no longer peace. It was surveillance, mechanical and merciless. I whispered, barely audible, "This is not safety, this is suffocation." The red light blinked again, steady, unblinking. I rolled onto my back and stared at it, my jaw tightening. They had promised me protection, but what I felt now was exposure. They had promised me peace, but the house breathed like a machine, measuring me, reminding me that I was never truly alone. My thoughts sharpened into a vow as I lay awake. I would not let this house break me. If Clara and Nathan believed perfection could hide cruelty, they were wrong. I was not weak, and I was not blind. I turned off the lamp, leaving only the pulse of that red light above me. My heart beat in rhythm with it, slower but stronger. If this house wanted to study me, it would learn something it had not expected. The first night alone in that house stretched endlessly. I lay on the bed, staring at the sterile ceiling above me, listening to the faint hum of machines moving air through vents. The sheets were crisp, almost too stiff, and the silence pressed into my ears like pressure. I rolled to my side, hoping for rest, but the feeling that I was not truly alone grew heavier by the minute. That was when I noticed it. In the corner of the ceiling, just above the closet, a small red light blinked steadily. It pulsed once, paused, then pulsed again with mechanical precision. At first, I told myself it must be a smoke detector. Clara and Nathan had insisted on safety. Every modern home had alarms, but I had seen smoke detectors before. This was different. The light was too sharp, too deliberate, and it blinked with a rhythm that felt unnatural. Not a safety signal, not a malfunction. It was something else. I pulled the blanket higher, as if covering myself would shield me from it. Yet the light cut through the darkness, unyielding, a small, unblinking eye. My breath caught. I whispered, "Why are you here? What are you watching?" No answer came, only the steady pulse. I turned onto my stomach, pressing my face into the pillow. But that made the sound of my own heartbeat louder in my ears, matching the light's rhythm. Blink, pause, blink. My heart followed, unwilling, trapped in its beat. I clenched my hands into the sheets. Clara's words echoed back. "The house will remind you when you do something wrong." I remembered Nathan's quiet tone, full of pride. The system notices, it recognizes habits. Lying there, I realized it was not just pride. It was a warning disguised as technology. That small red light was not protecting me. It was tracking me. I sat up abruptly. The lamp beside the bed clicked on before my fingers touched the switch. The house anticipated me, reading my movement, and that made the panic rise faster. I stared again at the corner. The red dot did not fade. It pulsed as though mocking me. I forced myself to speak louder, my voice firm, though my hands shook. "If you are here to watch, then watch. But know this, I see you too." And the words hung in the air, swallowed by silence, yet I felt a change inside me. Fear had its grip, yes, but defiance pushed back. I stood and walked toward the closet, keeping my eyes locked on that light. I dragged a chair from the corner and placed it beneath the spot. My knees ached as I climbed, but I pushed myself higher until I could see it closely. It was no smoke detector. The casing was thin, a smooth plastic shell with a tiny pinhole lens behind the glow. I leaned closer, breath unsteady. The lens reflected the lamp's light, and in that reflection, I saw myself. My face looked older, sharper, caught in a moment of revelation. I whispered to myself, "So this is what you meant by safety." The realization struck with force. Clara's obsession with perfection, Nathan's obsession with systems, this was the fusion. They had invited me into their home not to give me comfort, but to measure me, to control me, to observe me. I climbed down slowly, my body trembling, but my mind sharpened. I could no longer lie to myself. The promise of safety had been a mask, and the house was no sanctuary. It was a cage. I paced the room, my bare feet brushing against the cold floor. The red light continued to blink above me, steady, relentless. My shadow stretched long against the wall, shifting with each blink. I could almost feel the house breathing in rhythm with me, its invisible lungs filling and emptying as it studied my every move. I muttered, "You are not protecting me. You are dissecting me." The words sounded harsh, but they felt true. I returned to the bed, but this time I did not lie down. I sat upright, staring at the ceiling, refusing to let the light dominate me. My jaw clenched, my hands gripping the blanket tightly. I thought of Michael, of his steady voice when he used to tell me, "Evelyn, silence is not always peace. Sometimes it hides danger." He had been right. The house was too quiet, too controlled. Even the refrigerator hummed with a note that seemed to belong to the system rather than to itself. Every sound reminded me I was being recorded. Every click, every flicker of light, every automatic adjustment was not for me, but for them. I imagined Clara smiling as she scrolled through her phone on some distant beach, Nathan watching with satisfaction as data appeared neatly on his screen. I imagined them studying me, laughing at my small routines, mocking my solitude. My stomach twisted. The red dot pulsed again. I narrowed my eyes at it, whispering coldly, "If you think I am weak, you will learn differently." I reached for my nightstand drawer and pulled out an old notebook. My hands shook as I wrote quickly, noting the exact time I first saw the light, the way it blinked, the way the lamp anticipated me. Each detail mattered. If I was being studied, then I would create a record of my own. The act of writing steadied me. For every note they kept, I would keep one too. For every observation they made, I would counter with my own. I was not their passive subject. I was still Evelyn Ross, and I had survived far more than blinking red lights. When the clock struck midnight, I closed the notebook and set it firmly beside the lamp. I looked up once more. The red dot continued its cold, steady rhythm. I smiled faintly, but not kindly. It was the smile of someone who had seen through the mask. "You can watch me," I whispered, my voice sharp. "But you cannot break me." With that vow, I switched off the lamp, letting the room fall into shadow. The red light glowed against the dark, but now it no longer mocked me. It warned me. And warnings can be powerful when you know how to use them. I lay down at last, eyes open, heart steady. I would not sleep easily, not under the gaze of that false safety, but I no longer felt like prey. The house had revealed itself, and so had they. This was not protection. This was exposure, and I would not forget. The morning after that sleepless night, I carried the weight of the blinking red light in my chest. My eyes were tired, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. The house hummed, as if it were alive, its quiet machinery reminding me that I was never alone. I boiled water for tea, the kettle whistling in the silence, when my phone buzzed with an incoming video call. The name lit across the screen, Liam. My heart softened instantly. My grandson's voice had always been my refuge, his laughter the one sound that could cut through loneliness. I swiped to answer, and his smiling face filled the screen. Behind him, the camp cabin stretched under tall trees, sunlight bouncing off the lake nearby. He was breathless, his hair messy, his cheeks red from running. "Hi, Grandma," he shouted, the camera bouncing as he adjusted it in his small hands. "Hello, sweetheart," I said warmly, forcing my voice steady. "How is camp?" "It's awesome. We did canoeing today, and I fell in the water, but it was funny. Everyone laughed." He giggled, his joy unfiltered, the kind only a child can hold. For a moment, I forgot about the blinking red light. For a moment, I was only his grandmother again. But then he said it. With a grin as innocent as a sunrise, Liam leaned closer to the screen and whispered as if sharing a secret joke. "Grandma, I saw you sleeping. Mom and Dad showed me. You snore really loud." The air left my lungs. My grip on the phone tightened. My heart slammed against my ribs. I stared at him, my smile frozen, my mind reeling. "What did you say, Liam?" My voice cracked, though I tried to keep it calm. He laughed, oblivious. "You were in bed, and you had the blanket up to your chin. Your mouth was open a little, and you made this sound." He made a loud snoring noise into the camera, shaking with laughter. "Dad said you could wake the whole street." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. My hands trembled so much I nearly dropped the phone. "When did you see that video?" I asked, steadying my tone. "Last night," he said proudly. "They showed me on the tablet before bed. They said Grandma's funny when she sleeps. I thought it was cool that they have videos of you." "Cool? Videos of me?" His words cut deeper than any blade. I forced a smile so he would not see my horror. "That's something," I said softly. "Grandma, do you want me to show you my new bunk bed? It's really high. I almost fell off." He swung the camera toward the cabin, his voice carrying on about friends, campfires, and marshmallows. I listened, nodding, offering gentle responses. But inside, I was no longer at camp with him. I was back in my room, staring at that red light, realizing it was not paranoia. It was proof. Proof now confirmed by the innocent mouth of a child. Clara and Nathan had not just installed cameras for security. They had watched me sleep. They had mocked me. They had shared my private moments with their son as if it were entertainment. "Grandma?" Liam called, breaking through my thoughts. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm here," I said quickly. "You look kind of serious. Are you mad?" His voice softened, his big brown eyes peering into the screen. "No," I whispered, my throat tightening. "Not mad at you. Never at you." "Okay." He grinned again. "I miss you. When I come home, can we play cards? You always let me win." "Yes," I said firmly. "We'll play when you come home." We said goodbye, and the screen went dark. I sat in the kitchen, phone heavy in my hand, my tea gone cold on the counter. My pulse hammered, rage and sorrow tangled into something sharper. I whispered into the silence. They let him see me. They made me a joke for my grandson. My chair screeched against the floor as I stood. I marched down the hallway, every light snapping on in response to my movement, each one mocking me with its awareness. In the bedroom, I glared at the red light above. It blinked steadily, indifferent, merciless. "You think I am nothing," I said aloud, my voice trembling but fierce. "You think I am entertainment, a specimen, a show for your child." I grabbed the chair again and climbed, staring into that small lens until my reflection blurred. "But I am not blind. I am not broken. You will regret underestimating me." I climbed down slowly, my body shaking with both fury and clarity. Liam's innocent words had ripped away the last shred of denial. The cameras were real. The surveillance was intentional. And I was not just a subject. I was their experiment, their entertainment, their joke. I walked back into the living room, my hands clenched, my steps firm. Every polished surface mocked me. Every hum of the system sounded like laughter. I thought of Clara's smirk, Nathan's cold pride, and now Liam's laugh, unaware he had betrayed their secret. The cruelty was not just in the cameras. It was in the way they stripped me of dignity, even in the eyes of my grandson. I pressed my hand flat against the wall and whispered with a voice edged like steel, "You promised safety, but you gave me humiliation. You wanted me silent, but I will not stay silent any longer." The house hummed back at me, indifferent, its lights glowing on cue. But inside me, something shifted permanently. Fear no longer stood alone. Fury had joined it, and with fury came resolve. I picked up my notebook from the table and opened to the page I had written the night before. I added a new entry, my handwriting sharp and deliberate. Day 2. Liam confirmed he saw a video of me sleeping. Parents showed him. Cameras are not just hidden, they are weaponized. I underlined the last word twice. Then I set the pen down, my decision crystallizing in silence. The house could watch me all it wanted. But now I was watching it back. After Liam's words, there was no room left for denial. The small blinking light in my ceiling was not just a device, it was evidence of betrayal. I could feel the pulse of it in my chest, matching the rhythm of my anger. If they had one camera, they had more, and if they had more, then this entire house was a trap. I tightened the belt of my robe, steadied my breath, and made myself a vow. If they wanted to watch, then I would find every single place they had hidden their eyes. I began in the living room. The sunlight came through the glass doors, spreading across polished hardwood. Everything looked pristine, but I knew better now. I moved slowly, methodically, running my fingers along the edges of picture frames. My hand brushed against one frame that seemed heavier than it should have been. I lifted it from the wall and tilted it. At first glance, it showed only abstract art, but in the top corner, tucked into the wooden molding, was a black dot no bigger than a pencil tip. I stared at it, my jaw tightening. "There you are," I whispered. My reflection in the glass looked back at me, older but sharper, as if I were staring at a soldier preparing for battle. I set the frame back carefully, exactly as it had been, but my blood raced faster. If there was one here, there would be others. I moved to the bookshelf. The books stood in perfect order, arranged by color rather than subject. That detail alone screamed Clara's influence. I slid my hand along the spines until I reached one that seemed oddly stiff. I pulled it out. It was hollow. Inside was not paper, but circuitry, wires running to a pinhole lens in the corner of the binding. A book that did not tell stories, only stole them. I spoke out loud, my voice low but firm. "You think I will never know, but I know." I replaced the hollow book, leaving it untouched, and felt my pulse quicken. The house was not a home. It was a maze of deception. In the kitchen, I searched next. I scanned the appliances, the gleaming chrome surfaces, the tidy arrangement of utensils. The digital clock on the oven flickered faintly, but what caught my eye was the small, sleek timer sitting on the counter. It looked modern, almost decorative. I picked it up and turned it slowly. My fingers found a seam that did not belong. I tilted it toward the light. Inside the circular face, barely visible, was another lens. I set it down carefully, breathing through clenched teeth. My heart pounded. "Every room," I muttered. "Every single room." I tested the theory in the hallway. As I walked, the lights snapped on ahead of me, trailing like obedient dogs. I stopped suddenly, standing perfectly still, and looked up. In the corner, just above the thermostat, was a small dot hidden within the casing. To anyone else, it was just part of the design. But I saw it now. I locked eyes with it, refusing to look away. My breath came harder, my pulse stronger, but I did not blink. "Go on," I said coldly. "Watch me, study me, record me. You will regret it." The silence pressed heavier, broken only by the faint click of the thermostat adjusting itself. I stepped into the laundry room. The scent of detergent lingered, sharp and clean. The machines gleamed under the light, spotless as if they had never been used. I scanned the shelves above the dryer. Among bottles of fabric softener sat a small device disguised as an air freshener. I picked it up. My thumb brushed across a vent. Behind it was glass, dark and watchful. Another eye. My stomach twisted, but I set it back with deliberate calm. My notes. I needed notes. I rushed back to the kitchen drawer and pulled out my notebook. My pen scratched furiously across the page. Living room, frame, bookshelf, kitchen, timer, hallway, thermostat, laundry, air freshener. The list grew, each word like a nail hammered into the coffin of their lies. I wrote quickly, my hands steady despite the storm inside me. This was no longer paranoia. It was proof. I lifted my head and scanned the room again. Where else? The dining room. I walked quickly, each step echoing in the silence. The chandelier above the table sparkled, two perfectly aligned. I tilted my head and caught it. A tiny lens set between crystals, aimed straight at the table below. I clenched my fists. Dinner under interrogation. Perfect, Clara. Just perfect. I wrote it down. Dining room, chandelier. Every room was compromised. Every moment I had believed I was alone was a performance for them. They had collected my routines like insects in jars, labeling each movement, cataloging my existence. I stood in the center of the house, notebook pressed to my chest, and turned slowly in a circle. The walls were pale, flawless, and hollow, yet I could feel their gaze from every angle. The blinking red light in my bedroom had been the first truth, and now the rest of the eyes were revealing themselves one by one. I whispered fiercely, "You wanted me invisible, but you made me visible. You wanted me weak, but you woke my strength." I closed the notebook and set it firmly on the counter. I looked at the wine bottle they had left me, the note written in Clara's neat script. "For your quiet evenings." My lips curled into a bitter smile. There would be no quiet evenings in this house, not for me and not for them. I stepped back, lifted my chin, and stared directly into one of the cameras I had found. I let the silence stretch before I spoke. My voice was steady, sharp, unyielding. "This is not your game anymore. You may watch me, but I will make sure you see exactly what I want you to see." I walked away, my shadow stretching long against the pristine floor. Every eye followed, every device recorded, but now the balance had shifted. I was no longer their subject, I was their witness, and a witness is far more dangerous than a victim. The house had shown me its hidden eyes, but I knew there was more. Cameras could record, but someone had to store, label, and review what they captured. Nathan was too proud of his systems to leave it all to chance. There had to be a control center, a place where the strings pulled together, and I knew exactly where it was: the office upstairs. Clara had called it off limits. She said it was Nathan's workspace, filled with sensitive documents. I had respected the boundary until now, but respect had been met with humiliation. Their boundaries meant nothing when they had stripped me of mine. I climbed the staircase, each step creaking slightly under my weight. The lights came on one by one, guiding me like a prisoner being marched to judgment. My hand lingered on the banister, steadying me as my pulse hammered in my ears. At the top, I paused outside the office door. The handle gleamed under the hallway light. My breath caught as I pressed down. It opened. The room was a stark contrast to the rest of the house. Where the living spaces were pristine and lifeless, this office was cluttered with wires, monitors, and papers stacked in labeled boxes. The air buzzed faintly with electricity. Screens glowed against the dark walls, their light spilling over a desk crowded with cables. I stepped inside, closing the door softly behind me. My eyes fell on the laptop at the center of the desk. It was open, humming quietly, as though waiting for me. The desktop background showed a family photo: Clara, Nathan, and Liam smiling on a hiking trail. The irony cut deep. Family framed in pixels, while the real family was reduced to data in this very machine. I sat down, my fingers trembling slightly as they touched the trackpad. The cursor moved easily. No password. My breath hitched. Either Nathan was arrogant, or he never imagined I would dare come here. Folders lined the screen. Logs, footage, clips, analysis. My throat tightened as I clicked logs. A list of files appeared, each labeled by date and location. Living room 2024-06-10. Kitchen 2024-06-11. Bedroom 2024-06-12. I clicked the first. The video opened silently. There I was, sitting on the couch, reading a book. I watched myself shift uncomfortably, rub my temple, sip tea. At the bottom of the screen, a note appeared. Subject adjusted posture, possible sign of fatigue. My breath quickened. I clicked another. Me at the kitchen sink, rinsing a dish, staring out the window. The caption read, "Subject pauses frequently. Appears distracted." Another clip. Me at the dining table, wiping a tear from my cheek as I looked at an old photo in my lap. The caption, "Subject, emotional reaction. Triggers, isolation, memory recall." I gripped the edge of the desk until my knuckles whitened. They had not only recorded me, they had dissected me. My emotions, my habits, my grief, all reduced to notes in a study I had never agreed to join. I whispered into the silence, my voice sharp. "I am not your subject. I am not an experiment. I clicked another folder labeled Clips. Short videos lined the screen, each with tags: crying, muttering, staring into mirror, laughing alone. I clicked one. It showed me in the bedroom, turning slowly in front of the mirror. The caption read, "Subject examines own reflection, possible sign of self-doubt." Rage burned in my chest. I had lived a life of service, of care, of dignity, and here, in my daughter's house, I was reduced to a specimen in Nathan's lab notes. Clara's obsession with order, Nathan's obsession with control, they had merged into cruelty so polished it looked like progress. I scrolled further and found a folder labeled Reports. I opened it, and a document appeared. Weekly Summary. Subject: Evelyn Ross. My name printed coldly at the top of the page. Beneath it, lines of text. Subject demonstrates predictable routines. Subject responds emotionally to reminders of deceased spouse. Subject exhibits compliance in maintaining household order. Risk of resistance, low, low. They had assessed my resistance as low. They thought I was harmless, pliant, too old to fight. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. The screens blinked as if mocking me. I turned in a slow circle, my eyes scanning the shelves, the binders, the boxes. One was labeled Behavioral Study, Phase 1, another Emotional Metrics. The realization struck like a blade. Nathan's failed tech ventures had not ended. They had found a new project, and that project was me. I stepped back to the laptop, my breath hard and fast. I clicked through more videos, each one worse than the last. Me dozing in the chair, mouth slightly open. Caption: Subject: Vulnerable state. Me knitting quietly. Caption: Subject demonstrates soothing behavior. Me wiping counters. Caption: Subject performs domestic maintenance willingly. My chest ached, but my fury steadied me. I leaned closer to the screen and whispered through clenched teeth. You think you own me, but you forget. I am watching you now. I reached for my notebook and scribbled down details. File names, folder labels, the cold phrases they had used. Emotional reaction, self-doubt, vulnerable state. Every word would be evidence. Every word would be a weapon. I closed the laptop, the click echoing in the still room. The monitors kept their silent vigil, blinking lights like tiny, merciless stars. I looked at the family photo on the desktop one last time, my eyes narrowing. They call this family, I muttered. But this is not family. This is dissection. I left the office quietly, closing the door as carefully as I had opened it. My hands still trembled, but not from fear, from clarity. The house was not just a cage, it was a lab, and I was not just trapped inside it. I was its subject. The laptop had shown me enough to know I was not just being watched, but studied. Still, I needed proof that could not be denied. Proof that tied Clara and Nathan directly to the cruelty that turned my life into an experiment. I turned back to the desk, my eyes scanning the drawers lined neatly against the wall. I pulled the top one open. Stationery, pens, receipts from groceries, nothing unusual. The second drawer held neatly folded manuals, guides for the dishwasher, the thermostat, the security system. My breath caught when I saw one folder labeled Home Behavior Analytics. I froze. The words seared themselves into my mind. I reached for the folder with shaking hands, sliding it onto the desk. Inside were invoices printed on crisp paper. Each one bore the same letterhead. Home Behavior Analytics, Advanced Domestic Tracking Solutions. The first page was dated 6 months earlier. Service: Behavioral Monitoring Package. Monthly subscription, $799. My eyes widened as I read further. Detailed line items listed. Emotion recognition algorithms. Predictive habit analysis. Data storage for third-party review. Every invoice was addressed not just to Nathan, but to Clara as well. Her name, her signature, printed neatly at the bottom. I whispered, my voice like a blade cutting through silence. So you did not just know. You agreed. You paid. I flipped to another invoice. This one read, Upgrade. Premium package. Includes sleep cycle recording, voice analysis, micro-expression tracking. My stomach twisted as I scanned the note beneath it. Client authorized upgrade to capture additional data for research value. Signed by Nathan Ross. I set the papers down, my hands trembling not from weakness, but from fury. They had not only installed cameras, they had signed contracts, paid money, and willingly sold my privacy to a company that treated me like raw material for testing. I dug deeper into the drawer, pulling out more folders. One labeled Contracts. I opened it and found a multi-page document titled Home Behavior Analytics Service Agreement. The language was clinical, soulless. Subject data may be collected for research and analysis. Client grants permission for monitoring within the premises. Data may be shared for developmental purposes. At the bottom, Clara's signature gleamed in blue ink. Nathan's initials followed on each page. My hands tightened around the edges of the paper until it nearly tore. I muttered under my breath, sharp and bitter. You did this. You sold me. For money. For your perfect little house. My pulse thundered in my ears. Each page screamed betrayal. Clara's need for control, Nathan's obsession with technology. Now I saw how far they had taken it. They had not just humiliated me in private. They had sold my grief, my habits, my tears, for profit and pride. I sat down heavily in the chair, spreading the papers across the desk. One line from the contract caught my eye. Primary subject Evelyn Ross. Evelyn. My name, spelled correctly, written coldly, like I was a product cataloged for shipment. I whispered fiercely, You did not just make me your subject. You made me a commodity. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, forcing my breathing to slow. The red glow in my bedroom had been the first warning. Liam's innocent words had been the confirmation. But these papers, these were the confession. Clara and Nathan had not stumbled into cruelty. They had chosen it. They had paid for it. I looked again at the invoice. $799 a month. The figure gnawed at me. I knew Clara and Nathan had been struggling with money. Nathan's ventures rarely succeeded. Clara worked hard, but her obsession with image meant endless spending. And now I saw the truth. They had turned my life into their resource. My humiliation had funded their pride. I whispered into the silent office, every syllable sharp as glass. You put a price tag on your own mother. You turned my existence into your income. I shuffled the papers into a pile, then paused. One handwritten note slipped out from between the invoices. It was in Nathan's handwriting, scrawled across the margin. Potential to expand. More data equals higher compensation. Compensation. They had not only bought the service, they had been paid for my data. My privacy had not only been surrendered, it had been sold. I slammed the folder shut, the sound echoing in the quiet office. My chest rose and fell, fury steadying me like armor. They had not invited me here for safety. They had invited me here as raw material, an investment they could harvest. I pushed the drawer closed with a sharp shove. My eyes burned, but no tears fell. I would not cry for them again. Not after this. I picked up my notebook from the desk and wrote quickly, the pen carving into the page. Evidence. Contracts with Home Behavior Analytics, signed by Clara and Nathan, monthly payments for monitoring, compensation received. Subject listed, Evelyn Ross. I underlined my name twice. Proof that no denial could erase. I whispered into the still air, calm but unyielding. You thought I would never know. You thought you could bury me under paperwork, but I have lived long enough to know how to read fine print. The monitors around me blinked, indifferent. The wires hummed softly, but I no longer felt like prey surrounded by machinery. I felt like a witness collecting evidence. Every invoice, every contract, every careless signature, they were building the case for me. I gathered a few papers, folding them neatly, sliding them into my bag beneath my sweater. Not too many, enough to prove what I had seen, enough to strike fear when the time came. The rest I left in the drawer, untouched, so Clara and Nathan would not yet suspect how much I knew. I stood in the doorway of the office looking back one last time. The desk sat in cold silence, the papers spread across it like a battlefield. My voice came low, resolute. You built this house on lies, but paper cuts deeper than stone when the truth is written on it. I closed the door behind me, my steps steady as I walked back down the hallway. The house hummed as always, but the sound no longer suffocated me. It warned me, and warnings were not chains, they were weapons, waiting to be used. The papers in my bag felt heavier than stone as I walked back to my room. Every step echoed with betrayal, every light that flicked on seemed to mock me. The hum of the vents was no longer background noise. It was the voice of their scheme breathing down my neck. When I closed the bedroom door behind me, I leaned against it, clutching the folder tight against my chest. The contract had said it clearly. Primary subject, Evelyn Ross. My name, printed in ink, signed away by my own daughter and her husband. They had sold me piece by piece, turning my habits, my grief, my silence into profit. Clara's voice returned to me, sharp and venomous. I remembered her standing in the kitchen weeks before, arms crossed, her tone clipped. Mom, you're just staying with us. This isn't your house. You should be grateful we let you live here. At the time, I had swallowed the words like bitter medicine. I told myself she was stressed, that she didn't mean it. But now, those words rang truer than she had ever intended. I wasn't a guest. I was a burden dressed up as data, a specimen in their polished laboratory. I sat on the bed, staring up at the blinking red light in the ceiling. It pulsed steadily, a cruel metronome to the rhythm of my humiliation. My hands clenched. Grateful, I muttered aloud. Grateful for what? For being stripped of dignity? For being sold to strangers under the label of behavior tracking? The bitterness rose hot in my throat. I thought of every moment Clara had spoken down to me, her voice sweetened with poison. You should fold the towels the way I showed you. Don't put your things in the living room. It ruins the aesthetic. You don't need to cook. We have our own way of doing things. Each memory struck harder now that I knew what they had been doing behind the curtain. Their criticisms were not just about control. They were about conditioning me, shaping me, as if I were one of Nathan's projects. I whispered through clenched teeth, You were not teaching me to live in your house. You were training me like a subject in your study. My chest tightened. The sorrow of a mother who had spent her life giving love, only to be treated as an inconvenience, pressed heavy against me. I had raised Clara, held her when she cried, sacrificed for her education, stood by her when Nathan's ventures collapsed. And this was how she repaid me, with signatures and contracts, selling my humanity for a check. I rose suddenly, pacing the room, the notebook clutched in one hand, the folder in the other. My shadow stretched long against the sterile white walls. I gave you life, I hissed into the emptiness, and you turned mine into a transaction. The memory of Clara's smirk cut into me again. I could hear her voice as if she stood in front of me. You should be thankful we let you stay. I stopped pacing, my fists trembling. Thankful? I spat the word like poison. I should be thankful that my every tear is logged in a database? That my quiet evenings are sold to a company that studies grief like an experiment? The air felt colder. The walls seemed to close in tighter, pressing against my chest, suffocating me. I gripped the edge of the dresser, staring at my own reflection in the mirror. My eyes looked older, yes, but they burned with a fire Clara and Nathan had underestimated. I spoke to that reflection, steady and fierce. I may be staying here, but I am not yours to sell. You will not reduce me to data. You will not erase my dignity. The bitterness sharpened into something else. Resolve. I had the evidence now. Proof no one could deny. The invoices, the contracts, the signatures. They had thought I was blind, too old to see through their schemes. But I was not blind. I was not weak. I turned back to the bed, spreading the papers across the blanket. Each sheet screamed betrayal in Clara's neat handwriting and Nathan's calculated scrawl. I ran my finger over the words, Behavior Tracking Service, and whispered, This is not just betrayal. This is abuse, and I will not carry it in silence. I remembered another phrase Clara had tossed at me once, her tone clipped and dismissive. "Mom, you shouldn't act like this is your home. You're just visiting." Just visiting. The words sliced me open. Visiting meant temporary. Visiting meant disposable. Visiting meant I didn't belong. And yet here I was, with my name plastered across invoices that turned me into a permanent subject. I pressed my palms flat against the papers. My voice dropped to a cold whisper. "You didn't see me as a mother. You saw me as material, and that is the wound I will make sure you feel when the time comes." I gathered the papers back into my bag, folding them carefully, protecting each page. My chest heaved, my heart beat steady and strong. Clara's cruel words had once made me shrink, but now they fueled me. Every bitter memory was a weapon, every insult a reminder of how far they had fallen from what family was meant to be. The bitterness burned, but it no longer paralyzed me. It hardened me. I looked up at the blinking light once more, my lips curling into a sharp, defiant smile. "You want to log an emotional reaction? Then write this down. I am not your grateful guest. I am the storm you invited into your house." The light blinked steadily back at me, indifferent. But I knew. Behind it somewhere, Clara and Nathan had already made their fatal mistake. They believed I would always stay small, always stay quiet. But the truth was out now. And the truth was heavier than their lies could carry. The house was quiet that night, too quiet. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the vents sounded like the breath of a predator waiting in the dark. But fear no longer dictated my steps. I had collected evidence, I had gathered my thoughts, and now I was ready to strike. Not loudly, not with chaos, but with precision. I walked into the living room, the polished floor glowing faintly under the dimmed lights. Above me, I knew the chandelier camera watched, its tiny lens hidden among crystals. Another one lurked on the shelf, dressed as a decorative sensor. I stood in the center of the room and looked directly into one of them. For the first time, I smiled. Not out of kindness, but out of defiance. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands were steady now, guided by resolve. I opened the camera app, propped the phone up on the coffee table, and angled it carefully so it captured me fully. I positioned it directly under the lens I knew was recording. If Clara and Nathan wanted a show, I would give them one. I pressed record. The red circle blinked on the screen. My reflection stared back at me, tired eyes burning with strength. My voice came out low but sharp, cutting through the silence. "My daughter and her husband promised me safety," I began, the words deliberate, each one measured like a strike of a hammer. "But this house has turned into a trap. You told me I was welcome here, that I would be protected, but I see now what you have built. You don't see me as family. You see me as a subject, a source of data, a spectacle." I let the pause hang in the air. The cameras blinked silently above me. "You filled these rooms with hidden eyes. You studied my movements. You labeled my emotions as if grief and love could be reduced to data points. You showed my grandson videos of me sleeping, humiliating me in front of the child I love most. You told me I should be grateful when all you gave me was chains." I leaned closer, my voice firm, resonant. "But I am not silent anymore, and I will not be your subject. I am your witness. Everything you've done, I now have proof of. Every contract, every invoice, every cruel little note. You sold my privacy to strangers, but I will reclaim it." The words flowed, not as tears, but as steel. "You want an emotional reaction? Then record this. I will not let you bury me. I will not let you erase me. This house is your cage, not mine. And when you come home, you will realize the trap you built has already turned against you." I let the camera capture my face for several long seconds. My jaw set, my eyes locked with the lens above. I wanted them to feel the weight of the stare they had underestimated. Then, calmly, I ended with the only sentence they needed burned into their memory. "I will not stay silent." I pressed stop. The silence of the room swallowed my words, but the video remained, living proof of my defiance. I saved the file and immediately opened my email. With careful hands, I attached the video and sent it to my personal address. Then I sent a copy to another account I hadn't touched in years, an old library contact, still active, one I trusted more than my own family now. As the message sent, a wave of relief washed over me. For the first time since stepping into this house, I felt I had regained ground. They might own the walls, the wires, the cameras, but I had created my own record, one they could not erase. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, but I wasn't finished. I stood again in the middle of the living room, staring up into the chandelier. My voice rose, sharper now, meant for them to hear through the system. Did you get that? Did you log it? Call it defiance. Call it rebellion. Call it whatever label your reports demand. But know this. Your notes will not save you from the truth. The truth is already outside these walls, beyond your reach. I let the silence stretch, the hum of the house filling the void. Then I turned away, calm, deliberate, refusing to let them see fear. Back in my room, I slid the notebook under my pillow, the folder of invoices under my mattress. My hands moved with precision, like a soldier preparing for battle. I sat on the edge of the bed and whispered to myself, steady and fierce, "This is not their game anymore. This is mine." The red light blinked above me, indifferent, but I no longer cowered under it. I had spoken my truth, captured it, secured it. Even if Clara and Nathan deleted every file in this house, the evidence already lived elsewhere. I had broken their control. That night, I did not sleep. I sat upright, watching the small glow in the ceiling, and for the first time, I felt stronger than it. The bitterness was still there, the betrayal still burned, but they had given me the one weapon they thought I would never wield, my own voice, and I had just turned it against them. The morning after I recorded my testimony, I woke with a plan forming in my head. If Clara and Nathan believed I was still their compliant subject, then I would give them something new, unpredictability. I wouldn't smash their cameras. That would only prove they still had control. No, I would play with them, turn their own system against them. I stood in the living room, eyes on the chandelier camera. My reflection glimmered faintly in the crystal, distorted. I tilted my head, letting the silence stretch. "You want data? Then take this," I whispered. I picked up a small embroidered scarf from the side table, one of the few things I had brought from my old home. Slowly, deliberately, I draped it over the lamp positioned beneath the chandelier. The scarf's shadow fell perfectly, leaving the camera's view hazy and unfocused. I smiled faintly. "Log that, Nathan." I moved into the kitchen. The gleaming timer camera sat where it always did, aimed squarely at the counter. I set a glass of water in front of it, angling the glass so that its reflection fractured the view. Now, instead of a clear picture of me, the feed would capture warped shapes of light and shadow. I whispered as I adjusted the glass, "How does your analysis handle distortion? Do you call that fatigue or fear?" I left the glass exactly where it was and walked away, my steps firm. Next, the television. Nathan's notes had called me predictable, my routines too easy to chart. I decided to ruin that certainty. I turned the television on, set it to an old black and white film, then muted the volume. I let the actors move their mouths in silence, gestures exaggerated but soundless. From the cameras, it would look as though I was speaking with unseen guests. The algorithms would try to track voices that weren't there, responses that didn't exist. I sat on the couch, deliberately mimicking conversation with the figures on the screen. "Yes, I agree," I said softly, nodding at the flickering images. "That's exactly what I was thinking." I chuckled once, tilting my head, letting my expression shift into amusement. Then, without warning, I fell completely silent, staring blankly forward for minutes at a time. If they logged it, their notes would contradict themselves. Was I engaged? Was I withdrawn? Or was I something they couldn't categorize? That thought filled me with grim satisfaction. For once, I wasn't the one being confused. They were. I stood again, moving into the hallway. I remembered the camera hidden inside the thermostat. It had tracked every measured step I took. Now, I stopped deliberately in front of it, eyes locked on the lens. Then I shifted the rug beneath my feet a few inches, just enough so the next time I crossed the hall, my steps would look out of place. "You built this house to read me," I said under my breath, "but I am rewriting the script." Back in the dining room, I looked up at the chandelier again. Instead of sitting down for a meal, I pulled the chair 2 feet to the left and stood beside it, hands folded. I waited like that for nearly 10 minutes, motionless. Let them log that. Let them scramble to explain why I stood like a sentinel instead of sitting like a guest. The house hummed around me, every device alive. I felt the fear tighten in my chest, yes, but beneath it was a pulse of something sharper. Not just resistance, but control. For the first time since stepping into this trap, I was dictating the terms. That night, I continued the game. When I entered the laundry room, I shifted the detergent bottles so that one of them blocked the hidden air freshener camera. I left the lid off, letting the smell fill the room. To the lens, it would look like clutter, disorder, something Clara despised. I chuckled softly, the sound edged with bitterness. Go on, log that as defiance. Call it emotional instability, or maybe just call it what it is, your system failing. Before bed, I stood in the middle of my room and looked up at the red light. It blinked steadily, cold and rhythmic. I pulled the blanket from my bed and draped it across the chair, then sat on the floor instead, cross-legged, eyes closed. Let them wonder. Let them record my stillness in the wrong place, my bed empty. "You thought I'd break," I whispered, "but you don't understand. I spent decades holding classrooms of children together. I buried my husband with dignity. I lived through storms you couldn't imagine. You will not break me with blinking lights." I opened my eyes, staring at the faint glow. "And now, I'm breaking you." The next morning, I walked calmly through the house, my plan expanding. Every move I made was intentional. I left doors half open that were normally shut. I moved a vase 2 inches to the right. I placed a fork in the knife drawer. Small, meaningless acts to me, but to a system built on patterns, they were chaos. If Nathan reviewed his logs, he would see gaps, contradictions, behaviors that made no sense. Clara, with her obsession for order, would see a home slightly askew, and it would gnaw at her. I whispered into the silence as I passed the living room, "You wanted a subject to study. Instead, you have an opponent you can't control." The house continued its hum, indifferent, but I felt something shift in me. I was no longer caged prey pacing in fear. I was the one setting traps now. That night, as I wrote in my notebook, I underlined one word 3 times: control. Not theirs. Mine. The sun had already sunk low by the time the sound of tires crunched on the driveway. I sat in the garden, teacup in hand, the roses swaying faintly under the evening breeze. Their voices floated in before I saw them. Clara's sharp laugh, Nathan's easy tone, both laced with the smug satisfaction of a vacation well spent. But this time, I did not rise to meet them at the door. I stayed seated, my gaze steady on the fading sky. The gate clicked, the car door slammed, suitcases rolled across the pavement. Clara's voice carried like glass. "Finally, back to order." Nathan chuckled. "I can't wait to see how the system performed." The key turned in the lock. The door opened. I imagined them expecting the usual scene, me waiting with a polite smile, arms folded, offering tea. Instead, silence. The living room stood still, pristine yet colder than they had left it. Clara called out, her voice lilting but uncertain. "Mom?" No answer, only the hum of the refrigerator in reply. I pictured their eyes scanning the room, confusion stirring. Nathan set the suitcase down. "She's probably in the garden." Then they reached the kitchen. On the counter lay a plain envelope. Next to it, a small USB drive. Spread around were photographs, screenshots of their own files, me asleep under their cameras, me wiping tears alone in the dining room, me staring into the mirror, unaware of the eyes dissecting me. and beneath each photo, bold black letters I had printed myself. Subject, emotional reaction. Subject, vulnerable state. Their words, their cruelty, reflected back at them. The silence in that room thickened, heavier than any confrontation could have been. I heard Clara's voice break the stillness, sharp, trembling. "What is this?" She picked up a photo, her hand unsteady. Nathan didn't answer immediately. His eyes locked on the USB drive, his jaw tightening. Finally, he muttered, "She knows." Clara's breath caught. She slammed the photo back on the counter. "She went through our things. She had no right." Her voice cracked under its own weakness. "No right?" I whispered from the doorway, stepping inside. They turned sharply. My eyes met theirs, calm but merciless. "You stripped me of every right I had the moment you signed those contracts." The room froze. For once, neither of them had a ready answer. Nathan finally spoke, his voice low, trying to steady itself. "It's not what you think. The cameras were for safety, the analysis. It wasn't personal." I stepped closer, my voice sharp as steel. "Not personal? My tears were labeled, my silence logged, my routines dissected. You sold my life to strangers. Tell me, Nathan, what part of that is not personal?" Clara's eyes darted to the papers, the photos, the evidence spread like a crime scene. Her face flushed with anger, but her voice trembled beneath it. "Mom, you don't understand the pressure we're under. Nathan's work, the debts, we had no choice." I cut her off, my tone slicing through her excuses. "You had a choice, and you chose to sell me. You chose money over dignity. Technology over humanity. You chose betrayal." Silence again. The weight of it pressed hard. The only sound was the quiet whir of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock. Nathan finally exhaled, trying to regain control. "What do you want from us?" I looked at him, my stare unwavering. "I want you to feel the silence you left me in. I want you to know the taste of shame. And I want you to understand that every page of evidence here has already been copied and secured. You cannot erase what you've done." Clara's lips parted, her words faltering. "Mom?" But nothing followed. The lies had run out. I stepped back, my hand resting lightly on the counter near the envelope. "Inside this," I said evenly, "are copies of your contracts, proof of every payment you made to Home Behavior Analytics, proof of every time you sold me. It's yours to look at. But know this, the truth does not stay hidden anymore. You built a trap, and you walked into it yourselves." The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. Clara's eyes shimmered, though not with regret, only with fear. Nathan stood rigid, his face pale, his words stuck in his throat. I turned from them, my footsteps steady as I walked back toward the door. "You told me I was safe here, but I was never safe, not with you, not in this house." The evening air hit me as I stepped outside. The sky was painted violet, the garden bathed in shadow. Behind me, the silence of the house stretched, broken only by the faint rustle of paper as they picked up the evidence I had left for them. They had expected me to wait quietly for their return. Instead, I had left them the weight of their own betrayal, staring back at them from their polished countertops. And in that silence, for the first time, it was they who were trapped. The kitchen lights buzzed faintly, the silence pressing against every corner of the room. Clara clutched the photos I had left on the counter, her knuckles white, her face hardening into something sharp. Nathan stood beside her, his jaw set, but his eyes darting between me and the USB drive. Finally, Nathan spoke, his voice forced calm, the kind of tone that tried to sound reasonable but cracked at the edges. "Mom, you misunderstood. This was never meant to hurt you. These cameras, these notes, they're just part of the home security system. It's data, nothing more. We did this for safety." His words fell flat, sour in the air. I didn't answer. I only looked at him, steady, silent. Clara slammed the photos back onto the counter, her voice rising, brittle and cruel. "You're overreacting. You're always so sensitive. You act like you're the center of everything. But you're not. You're not important enough for anyone to waste time analyzing. This isn't about you, Mom. It never was. The bitterness in her tone sliced through the air. For a moment, I could hear only the pounding of my heart. I let the silence stretch. Nathan shifted, his voice breaking it again. She's imagining things. She found some files. She doesn't understand the context. That's all. Mom, you're making something small into something dramatic. Clara crossed her arms, her smile cold, venom dripping in every word. Do you really think you matter that much? You're just staying here. You think you're some kind of pillar? Some true cot in this house? You're not. You're a guest. And frankly, you're a guest who should be more grateful. Her words hit hard, but I didn't flinch. I stood still, my breath steady, my eyes unyielding. Inside, the bitterness surged, but outward, I gave them nothing. I let them believe I was frozen, unsure, wounded. Then slowly I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Without a word, I tapped the screen. A voice filled the kitchen, sharp and unmistakable. Clara's voice. The recording played clearly. She thinks she's the backbone of this family, but really, she's just a test subject. It's fascinating watching her, like observing an old lab rat who still believes she has dignity. The sound hung in the air like poison gas. Nathan's face drained of color, Clara's eyes widened, her lips parting, but no words came. The mask slipped from both of them, their carefully crafted denials crumbling in an instant. I let the recording play twice. Clara's mocking laughter echoed against the kitchen walls, stabbing through the silence. Then I stopped it, slipped the phone back into my pocket, and stood tall. The weight of their own cruelty pressed down on them now, and I didn't need to add a single word. The house itself seemed to close in, the hum of the appliances louder, sharper, almost like judgment. Clara tried to speak, her voice trembling now. That was taken out of context. But the words sounded hollow, stripped of power. Nathan's mouth opened, then closed again. He looked at the USB on the counter, at the photos, at me, and then dropped his gaze to the floor. I didn't move. I didn't soften. My silence was louder than their excuses. Clara gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles pale. She forced a bitter laugh, but it faltered halfway. You think this changes anything? You think one little recording makes you right? You don't understand the sacrifices we've made, the pressure we're under. You've been blind, Mom, blind your whole life. My voice came at last, low, steady, sharp enough to cut through her rant. Blind? No, Clara, I saw more than you thought. I saw every contract, every invoice, every note you and Nathan signed. And now I've heard your own words. This isn't about sacrifice. This is about cruelty, about choosing to treat me as less than human. Clara's face twisted, her voice shaking with anger. You're just trying to make us villains. You always want to play the victim. I met her eyes, unwavering. I don't need to make you villains. You did that yourselves. The silence that followed was crushing. Nathan finally spoke, his voice flat, defeated. Clara, stop. But she didn't. She turned on me again, her words venomous but cracked. You're not strong, Mom. You're old. You can't fight us. You can't win. I stepped closer, my voice quiet but edged with steel. Then why are you trembling? Her lips pressed tight, her eyes flashing, but she said nothing. I turned away from them, my steps calm, deliberate, my presence filling the silence they could no longer control. Behind me, the photos, the USB, the recording, they were no longer my burden. They were theirs. The walls of their perfect home, once their pride, now echoed with their betrayal. And for the first time, they were the ones trapped inside it. The kitchen was still thick with the echo of Clara's cruel words and the playback of her own laughter. Nathan stood pale, Clara flushed with fury, and between them lay the photos, the USB, the undeniable truth. I stood calm, my hands steady, my voice unwavering. I looked directly at them. You promised me safety. You looked me in the eye and said this house was my refuge. But you turned it into a trap, and I refuse to live inside a trap." Clara's lips parted, her face draining of color. Nathan shifted uneasily, as if words might come, but none did. I let the silence sit heavy on their shoulders. I continued, slow, deliberate. "I don't need your apologies. I don't need your excuses. I need only one thing: distance. I will not remain in this place where my dignity was bought and sold." Nathan finally muttered, his voice small. "Mom, don't do this. It doesn't have to end like this." I met his gaze, sharp and firm. "It already has." I turned from them and walked toward my room. Each step was measured, not rushed, not frantic. Clara called after me, her voice sharp but cracking. "Where are you going? You can't just walk away." I didn't answer. The weight of her desperation only confirmed my choice. In my room, I opened the closet and pulled out the small suitcase I had kept tucked away. I placed it on the bed, unzipped it, and began folding my clothes with precision. My sweaters, my books, the few keepsakes I had left of Michael, all slid into the case neatly. My movements were calm, almost ritualistic. No tears, no trembling. Behind me, Clara appeared in the doorway. Her arms were crossed, but her face betrayed unease. "You're overreacting. You'll regret this. Where else will you go?" I didn't lift my eyes from the suitcase. "Anywhere that isn't poisoned by betrayal." Her voice sharpened, defensive. "We gave you shelter. We opened our doors. And this is how you repay us?" I straightened, turned to her, my voice cutting. "You gave me walls filled with cameras. You gave me silence filled with suspicion. You gave me chains and called it shelter." Clara faltered, her mouth closing, her eyes hardening as if anger could shield her from shame. Nathan stepped behind her, his voice lower, almost pleading. "Mom, let's talk. We can fix this." I shook my head slowly. "You can't fix what you chose to break." I zipped the suitcase, the sound slicing through the tension. The finality of it left the air colder. I picked up the framed photo of Michael from the nightstand, slipping it into the side pocket of the suitcase. My hand lingered on it a moment. His face, steady and kind, seemed to remind me I was not walking away empty. I was walking away with myself intact. When I turned back to them, my voice was calm, resolute. "I gave you years of my life. I held this family together in silence, in service. But I will not let my final years be spent as your subject. I choose myself now." Nathan's shoulders sagged, Clara's face contorted with rage she couldn't mask. "If you leave," she snapped, "don't come back. Don't expect us to be waiting for you." Her words hit the air like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I pulled the suitcase off the bed, holding it firmly at my side. "I don't expect anything from you anymore." The truth of that sentence hung heavy, and I could see it land on her face, draining the fight from her tone. I walked past them, my suitcase rolling softly over the hardwood floor. Down the hallway, through the sterile living room, past the kitchen still littered with evidence of their betrayal. At the front door, I paused only once, my hand on the knob. Without turning back, I said, "You built a trap and called it a home, but I will not live as your prisoner. I step out free, and you will remain caged in your lies." Then I opened the door. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of the garden I had tended myself. The roses swayed gently, indifferent to the storm that had erupted inside. I stepped onto the porch, suitcase in hand, and felt the weight lift from my chest. Behind me, the house stood silent. I didn't look back. I descended the steps, my movement steady, purposeful. The gravel crunched under my shoes as I walked toward the gate. Every sound, every step, was a declaration. I was leaving not in shame, not in fear, but in dignity. As the gate clicked shut behind me, I whispered softly to myself, "This is not the end. This is the beginning." And for the first time in years, I believed it. I left their house without looking back, and within weeks, I signed a lease for a small apartment in Quincy. It wasn't large, but it had everything I needed: quiet walls, sunlight that spilled across the hardwood floor, and a small patch of earth out back that would soon be my garden. The first morning there, I opened the back door and stepped into the yard. The air smelled of salt from the bay, carried inland by the breeze. The soil was rough, neglected, but it welcomed my hands. I planted marigolds, daisies, and lavender. I dug until the dirt stained my palms, until the garden began to look like life instead of abandonment. I hung a wind chime above the porch, ceramic leaves clinking together in uneven notes. It didn't sound perfect, but it was mine. Inside, I stacked my books on open shelves. This time, they weren't arranged by color or order, but by memory. Michael's old history volumes sat near the bottom, my poetry collections by the window, the cookbooks Liam once flipped through as a child in the kitchen. Every spine told a story. Every corner of the apartment carried my fingerprints, not surveillance logs. One afternoon I heard a knock. When I opened the door, Liam stood there, backpack slung over his shoulder, eyes wide and uncertain. "Grandma," he said softly, "Mom doesn't know I'm here. Can I come in?" I nodded and stepped aside. He walked in, looking around the cozy space. "It feels different," he said, his voice almost reverent. "Peaceful." I smiled and gestured to the small reading chair by the window. "Sit," I told him. He pulled out a book from his bag, one I had given him years ago, its corners bent from use. He opened it and began to read quietly, his voice steady, filling the room with warmth no camera could steal. I sat beside him, knitting in my lap, listening to the rise and fall of his words. The garden outside swayed gently. The chime sang its uneven song, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. The memory of Clara's voice still lingered in the back of my mind, sharp and cruel. Nathan's denials still echoed faintly. But those sounds no longer owned me. They had built a house of control, a cage of wires and lies, and I had walked out of it, carrying only what was mine, my dignity, my truth, my freedom. Liam looked up from the book, his expression earnest. "Grandma, do you feel safe here?" I reached over and touched his hand, my voice calm, unshaken. "They promised me safety once, but they built a trap instead. I chose freedom, and freedom is safer than anything they could ever offer." His small fingers squeezed mine. He didn't answer, but his silence was agreement. The sun dipped lower, painting the walls with gold. I leaned back, listening to the quiet, the kind of quiet that held peace, not suspicion. The wind chime rang again, imperfect but alive, like my life now. Not flawless, not staged, but real. I had stepped out of their trap and into my own beginning. And in that small garden, with Liam's voice reading beside me, I found what they could never give me, peace that belonged to me alone.